Big 12 Radio on TuneIn. Ari Temkin joins us, and it's great to have you every week if we can, Ari. I know you got a busy schedule, too. Utah, BYU, they flex their muscles. Some teams have to be going like, what in the world with the cleanup? And then, of course, Colorado with the big-time play at the end to win it overtime. BYU, K-State, let's start with that one.
Yeah, and what a weekend for Baylor and Kansas, my alma mater, and of course Baylor, team that's near and dear to your hearts. But yeah, brutal endings for both of those teams, and both of those games. This is certainly one to remember for BYU. You know, I think in a year last year for BYU, for Cincinnati, for Houston, it was sort of a forgetful year. This was a incredible win. BYU did not have one of these kinds of wins in the Big 12 last year. It basically came down to the floodgates completely opening up. This game was 6-3, closing in on the last minute or so before half. K-State has the football. DJ Giddens had a fumble return for a touchdown. Then on the next possession for K-State, Tyler Batty, the talented BYU pass rusher, has an interception after 2 plays. And then a few plays after that, it's Jake Retzloff to Chase Roberts for a touchdown. Then it goes to half. In the first drive of the third quarter, Avery Johnson's intercepted, and then after a 3-and-out following another miscue by K-State, that incredible punt return for kickoff or punt return for touchdown by Parker Kingston. That is one of the more incredible punt returns you'll ever see for touchdown. So it was 31 unanswered for BYU in this game. After leading 6-3, K-State found himself down a big 34-6, and it was just the floodgates that opened from there. I mean, it's one of the more wild games you'll ever see in terms of mistakes being made. Normally we see K-State being, special teams but in this game they just were not. And there were a lot of great special teams plays. Obviously, Josh Cameron had some for Baylor, but really across the Big 12 landscape, there were tons of great special teams plays and kick returns and punt returns for touchdown. But yeah, this just went from bad to worse for K-State. They just couldn't stop the bleeding. And once it seems like Avery Johnson kind of got in his head a little bit, he just couldn't get out of it. And it just was mistake after mistake after mistake. And it wasn't just Avery. It was punt return. It was everybody making mistakes in this one.
Ari, let's talk about that Kansas-West Virginia game. It was a prove-it game for both teams, and it was evenly matched. But Garrett Green, who I think for a fan base has to be one of the most frustrating quarterbacks in the country, in that he can do things like he did in the fourth quarter of that game where he's the super athlete, and then other games he's just not there. But what did you think about that, and what do you think Kansas does to fix what are, especially on offense, chemistry problems?
Yeah, I mean, I think, target number one for Kansas fans is former Baylor offensive coordinator Jeff Grimes. He's in such a tough spot when you think about having to take over for Andy Kotelnicki, who, he put some eye-popping offenses together for Kansas. And so for KU fans that were used to seeing what we saw in that Andy Kotelnicki era, the Jeff Grimes era is off to an inauspicious start, to say the least. Look, I put some of this on Jeff Grimes. I think in some ways it's probably overstated. I put some of it on Jalen Daniels. And look, sometimes, guys, things just work and click, and sometimes they don't. And I think that's kind of where we're at. Kansas just was in position over the last couple of years offensively where everything clicked. And at this point, it's like no matter what they call, it's the wrong play, or it's a missed throw, or it's an interception, or it's bobbled. Like there's just something wrong. But Kansas now has had 3 consecutive games here. They started 1-0 with their win over Lindenwood. Now have lost 3 consecutive games to Illinois, UNLV, and to West Virginia. And all of these games, Kansas has been leading late, and they've blown leads. And I think at one point, we're over 90% in terms of the win probability via ESPN in terms of their scoring. So 3 straight games, 3 games in which they've crumbled. And look, I do put this one, at least one specific play, on Jeff Grimes. Their speed option for Kansas was working very well in this game. And then they were faced with a 3rd and 3 after West Virginia was down 10. So this game was 28-17 with less than 5 minutes to go. West Virginia got the score to go 28-24. And Kansas faced a 3rd and 3 and just kind of ran the ball instead of running that speed option, which again had been so successful all game, whether it was to the left or to the right. They just had a ton of success with it. For some reason, they didn't use it. Then they end up punting the ball right back to Garrett Green in the offense, who went right down the field and scored. West Virginia scored 15 points, basically 2 minutes of game action. And it was like everything went wrong for Kansas in that final 3 minutes. Everything went right for West Virginia. Credit Garrett Green for making the plays. I mean, you're right, Paul. Can be maddening at times, but man, he made the plays and the throws in this game to win them the game, to get them 15 unanswered. So awfully similar to what we saw between Baylor and Colorado on Saturday.
Yeah, let's talk Baylor, Colorado. What an incredible, entertaining game all the way until the very end, and obviously a big win for the Buffaloes, Ari. So I guess it's kind of like a three-pronged question. What was your disbelief level there at the end, watching how that all unfolded? And how big of a win is this, do you think, for Colorado? While simultaneously, what do you think this means for Dave Aranda and the Bears, who just can't seem to finish or win a big game, even when it's right there for the taking?
Yeah, and it's a great question, because I think in some ways there's a lot of positives to take away from this game. I mean, the way that Sawyer Robertson played was phenomenal. I mean, the dude played so well, and I think early in the season we saw DeQuan Finn missing open guys and off target. And so I think just on the one hand, the way Sawyer Robertson played was really, really good. I mean, that 4th and 2 run for 42 yards, the touchdown was incredible. I mean, he had the great throw at the beginning of the game, the touchdown to Monterey Baldwin, where he laid out and caught it, and then Hal Presley with the one-handed grab. I mean, there were some big-time plays in this game on both sides. Cameron, every punt return or kick return seemed like it was going to go for 6. It was incredible how bad they were at trying to get stops. But like the thing to me, and to go back to your question about how much disbelief, like a lot, simply because they missed the Hail Mary on the previous play. Mm-hmm. So how do you let that happen twice? It's one thing for them to just miss entirely, but I mean, Shepard was there. The defensive back had fallen down. Like, that ball has to be caught on the play prior to the Wester touchdown. So for me, all of the good in this game was sort of undone by what we saw in those final 2 plays, because it's like, shame on you if it happens to me once, shame on me if it happens to me twice. How on earth do you have a defensive-minded head coach? And I know after the game he talked about, well, we had an injured linebacker, and so we weren't, we overloaded one side, but it's like, it's crazy to think you can watch that play happen to Shepard and have him miss it, and then not refocus your team to be like, hey, do not let anybody behind you. They literally need a touchdown. Keep everything in front of you. Like, even if they catch it at the 1, make sure they do not get into the end zone. So I think, Craig, the answer to your question is, like, I was shocked because it was like lightning struck twice. Like, if it happens once, you have to feel good that they didn't convert it. But the fact that they went back to the well and then found Wester on the next play, that to me is the biggest indictment on Aranda and on this team. It sort of undid all of the positives for me from this game, because this was a game you have to win. And again, especially given you had 2 shots at it, you stop them the first shot. That should have been it. You shouldn't give them another chance to get behind you. That's one huge mistake that did not get rectified within the course of 2 plays.
Yeah, and especially I said the winner of that game, I didn't say they would get to a bowl game, but it gives them that chance, because that's a game. You look down at the others. BYU now coming in with smoke coming out of their ears. I don't know. Do they follow that up with a win against Kansas State, and that's who they are, or not? But Oklahoma State can't run the ball. Bowman was just not good. Your thoughts about them? Tech had a nice win. They've now put 2-2 together. Cincinnati with a nice win. Iowa State with a nice win. Do you have do your tiers in any way change the power structure in the conference?
Well, look, I mean, it's hard to look away from the BYU win and not, they're 4-0 now. Their defense is legit. I think that's the biggest factor for me is, crazy things happen at night in Provo. I get it. And let's see if it travels. But one thing that we've seen now, I went to the SMU BYU game a few weeks ago and was not very impressed with either team. And then now look at how both of those teams look. I mean, BYU held SMU out of the end zone and held K-State out of the end zone. That's 2 of the most explosive offenses in college football. SMU just hung 66 on TCU, and BYU held them without a touchdown in that game. So I like, biggest takeaway for me through, the first 4 games of this season in college football in the Big 12 is BYU's defense is legit. And Jay Hill, a year after his defense was really, really bad, seems to have figured some things out with BYU on the defensive side of the football. The other thing is, and obviously you mentioned this with Oklahoma State, like Utah has joined the Big 12 and they have come into our living room and they have put their feet up with their shoes on and they're asking us to serve them drinks. I mean, this was, the fact that the line moved as much as it did told us that Vegas didn't think Cam Rising was going to play, and voila, he didn't. And yet, despite that, they still absolutely demolished one of the best teams in the Big 12 up front on both sides of the line of scrimmage. I mean, to me, Wilson and Bernard, both on 3rd and 4th down, it was demoralizing for Oklahoma State's defense. They continued to line up and run on 3rd and long, 4th and long, 3rd and short, 4th and short. It didn't matter. I mean, they converted a 3rd and 11 on the ground. They converted a 3rd and 7 on the ground. Isaac Wilson had a very impressive 4th and 1 conversion. He had a 4th and 2 conversion. It just didn't matter. They knocked Oklahoma State off the football and were able to win because of their run game. And then you mentioned Alan Bowman. I mean, I was very surprised that Gundy went to Rangel. Obviously we've seen this previously when he started and rotated 3 quarterbacks for the first 3 weeks of the season, and Brock Heward kept talking about on the broadcast, give your guy a chance who's thrown 5 touchdowns in the last week, to get over this. And the fact that he sat for a quarter and a half, I don't know that helped them. I mean, do they win the game if Bowman plays the entire game? Probably not. But it just speaks to how good Utah's defense is. This is one of those years where we maybe weren't sure the type of personnel that Utah had and were they going to be as good on defense. They've got 2 NFL linebackers. I mean, they're absolutely locked down in terms of what they were able to do to a really high-powered Oklahoma State attack. Forget the rushing numbers because Oklahoma State needs to figure out how to run the football more effectively. But Oklahoma State's passing offense has been phenomenal this year, and they completely stymied that passing offense to the point that Bowman got replaced in that game. So, yeah, I mean, that one stood out in a big way because it was disheartening, I think, for like those of us that have covered this conference as long as we have and have been around this conference. We think about the old Southwest Conference Big 8 days. You want to think that we have some pride for the way things used to be, the early Big 12, but man, Utah just made themselves right at home in the new Big 12 with that win over Oklahoma State. And now you get a matchup this weekend between Oklahoma State and Kansas State that's kind of a must win for both of those programs. I hate to say it this early in the season, but if you find yourselves looking up at the standings at Utah or K-State or Oklahoma State, depending on who it is, that's going to be a tough to overcome in terms of conference standings. It's not obviously the death knell. It's 2 weeks into conference play. But, man, it'd be tough to think that whoever loses the Oklahoma State-Kansas State game on Saturday would still win the conference.
Is it panic button Saturday for TCU and Kansas then?
Yeah, very much so. Man, that TCU loss, we could sit here, right, and bellyache the Kansas loss, and certainly I have the last 3 of them. But TCU's defense is unreal in terms of how bad it is. It looked – the first couple of weeks, like Andy Avalos had figured some things out and that they were going to be a much different, more explosive defense. As it turns out, the 27 points they give up to Stanford was the lowest amount of points they give up to an FBS opponent through the first 3 FBS opponents that they had. They obviously did a great job against Long Island, but since then it's been 27, 30-something, and now 66 to their 3 FBS opponents. Just absolutely brutal. And I think another team that cannot run the football. I mean, we have now seen a group of teams in the Big 12 that have just for whatever reason, 3-4 weeks into the season cannot run the football. Josh Hoover's been spectacular, but he had 2 interceptions, had another sack fumble in this game. So 3 turnovers of the 5. This was not a recipe for success. You're -5 in the turnover margin. You give up a punt return for touchdown. This was sort of similar to the K-State BYU game where it was like, man, you just got caught up in a avalanche. And this one was, I want to say from a scoring standpoint, I had the numbers in front of me. So this game was close. It was 17 nothing SMU like that. Then it was 17-14. And then SMU basically put this game away with the final 3+ minutes of the first half. It went from 24-21 to 41-21 on that 17-0 run by SMU to put this thing away. And basically from that point on, TCU was trying to play catch up. But it was very similar to the Kansas State game insofar as the game kind of seemed out of reach at first, and then the floodgates opened and it was all bets are off going into halftime.
I guess final thing for me is, man, first of all, this conference is starting off to look just as entertaining as we predicted it might be. It's also probably going to cost them when it comes to playoff spots, and we knew that could also be a reality as well. But what do you think about Texas Tech beating Arizona State? They're obviously in Lubbock. That helps. It was a back and forth. They were mostly in the lead, but it was a close game at times throughout. They're able to get it done with Taj Brooks back. They're at 3-1. They're back at home this week. Just where kind of are they on your feelings level, the Red Raiders, right now?
Yeah, no, I mean, I would say this week is the first week where it feels like it's appropriate to be, high on Texas Tech. Take the Wazoo game out of it because it was such a bad game. And obviously they didn't have Taj Brooks, and we see how much of a difference he makes. Now, does he change the game that much? Maybe. But, I mean, he's one of the best backs in the Big 12 and certainly in college football. Leading into this game, Arizona State had gone 5 of 6 on fourth down and was +6 in the turnover margin. They went 0 for 3 in this game and were -1. So we see the recipe for Arizona State to be successful. They've got to limit Sam Levitt's throws. As soon as Arizona State find themselves down multiple touchdowns, they're in a bad spot because Levitt is very limited as a passer, and he's still evolving. He's still becoming better. He's young and inexperienced. He's just not very good as a passer. This is another one of those games that was Texas Tech was up 14-0, then it was 14-10, then Tech went up 24-10, and then they had this huge play by Cameron Scadaboo where he had a screen pass. He took 66 yards, and then he cashed it in for a touchdown, and that made the game 24-16, and that was as close as Arizona State would get because I thought Baron Morton did a great job spreading the ball around. He got a lot of receivers involved, Josh Kelly, Conyers, the tight end, and then once they got that lead in the second half, it was over because they were just able to run the ball so well with Taj Brooks, and he just kept moving the chains, keeping the clock moving, and I think that was kind of the story. Like, once they got that lead, I think it was 27-16, it was over because they could just salt the game away with Taj Brooks. I think they added another field goal after that. But this is a recipe for Texas Tech to be very successful. The one thing coming into this season we knew that Texas Tech was going to need was to keep Baron Morton healthy. And so far he's been healthy and the results have been there. It's just the one blip is the Washington State game. And one, Washington State looks really, really good. And two, without Taj Brooks, who knows how that game would have gone had he been healthy. So huge loss for them in that game. And we see kind of the recipe for success. Spread the ball around, don't turn the ball over, and feed Taj Brooks early and often. And that's what they did in this game. I also think for Arizona State, they, from an identity standpoint, we know who they are. And now this only, ratchets it up, teams forcing Levitt to throw in those situations.
Yeah, it's been an interesting start. It's a conference that always has a surprise or two. BYU's one of those, and who knows who else it might be. And there's always a team or two at the top that kind of blows a tire, and then they fight the rest of the year to try to get themselves back in position to do very well. UCF does get the attention coming up with the game against Colorado. I'm sure Colorado winning didn't hurt, but they get big noon on Saturday in Orlando, and I think that's great because it should have been in Stillwater this past weekend instead of in Columbus, Ohio.
Well, I agree. And look, I mean, Baylor had 8 sacks on Colorado. Baylor had 4 sacks coming into that game total and 8 sacks in this game, right? So, the question was, how much improved is Colorado's offensive line? I thought, man, Nebraska is really that good up front on the defensive side of the football. And man, now I'm not so sure that Colorado's improved at all on the offensive line. It's really incredible what Shedeur Sanders is able to do despite basically being pressured on every drop back. And again, 8 sacks. Like, he was sacked 56 times last year, and it doesn't seem like he's on track for that to stop. So, I mean, UCF has added some pass rushers. Kelly's been really good to start. I mean, I think so far UCF, they've been really, really good. And the fact that they're a touchdown favorite right now, or I think a 2-touchdown favorite at this point against Colorado in this game, speaks to where Vegas thinks they are. And we look so much at their offensive productivity and the players they brought in through the portal, but defensively with Deshaun Pace, who came over in the portal as a linebacker from Cincinnati, and Kelly from Miami, like, they're going to get after Shedeur Sanders. I just don't know how this dude survives the season. I mean, the 8 sacks gets Baylor. I mean, there was that stretch there, and this is where I think the loss is so disappointing, guys. 4 sacks over 5 dropbacks before he took over in that game. So, number one, you're not going to get to him in terms of the mental part of it because he's clearly, like, you're just not going to impact his ability to continue to get up and throw. But that's just my concern for Colorado moving forward. It's why I like UCF in this game. I think they can get after Shedeur in a big way. And it's up to Pat Shurmur and Deion Sanders now to figure out how on earth they're going to keep Shedeur clean, because this dude has taken a beating over the last year plus now.
There's always been some things, not always, there's been things said about him, but that kid is tough as nails. I mean, tough as nails, because you're right, he took a beating.
I think you can talk about his ego or whatever, however you want to translate that. But anybody starts to say like Shador's not good or like that, you immediately just discredit yourself because the dude can play. The dude can absolutely
He's entitled.
play.
He might be spoiled.
Sure.
He might say the wrong things, but the dude is a beast, and he is tough. He's insanely tough.
Thank you, Ari. Tell everyone they get you on TuneIn Radio. What time that you guys start every day?
No, appreciate it very much, Smokey. Check us out, tune in. If you don't have the app, go make sure to download it. We are the home of the Big 12, the exclusive home of the Big 12. We've got coaches shows, player interviews. We're going to have Kalani Sitake on tomorrow's show. So make sure to check it out, 7 to 10 a.m. Central on TuneIn. Again, just download the app. The show is free. It's going to ask you to, to sign up for TuneIn Premium, but you can just X that out, that offer it out, and check out the show for free every single day, Monday through Friday.
I just had somebody tell me that UCF has – I don't know if they have had any sacks on defense so far. I know they've been sacked 3 times, but I'm not sure exactly how much they've sacked the opposing quarterback. Well, they might get their feed this week. We'll see.
Yeah.
Ari, thank you.
This is the way to break that. No, I'm pretty sure Kelly has at least 1 sack.
Okay.
So I think they've got at least 1.
Yeah, UCF fan on the chat room. I was trying to look it up, but I was mainly just getting their offensive stats.
On the flip side, I am looking forward to the whole contingent of runners just smashing into that Colorado defense and seeing what that looks like ultimately over the course of 4 quarters. That's going to be very interesting because that Colorado defense has got a little something to it, especially after last week. But I don't know if they're ready for just getting smashed over and over again by that running attack for the Knights. That's
or anybody else for that matter. Yeah. Ari Temkin, Big 12 Radio on TuneIn, as he mentioned, each weekday morning, and including Kalani Sitake, who I think will join us at some point this week. One of our best friends of the show.